Hello and welcome back to All Things Money. I'm your host for the show, David Blain. Thank you for joining us today. During this segment, we're going to be talking a little bit about President Obama, taxes, and the Buffett Rule. If you're not familiar with the Buffett Rule, we talked about this a little bit last week on the show, but we've had numerous requests for more information as well as to expand on this topic. So let me read you a quick quote from President Obama on September 19, 2011. Any reform should follow another simple principle. Middle-class families shouldn't pay higher taxes than millionaires and billionaires. That's pretty straightforward. It's hard to argue against that. Warren Buffett's secretary shouldn't pay a higher tax rate than Warren Buffett. There's no justification for it. It's wrong that in the United States of America, a teacher or nurse or construction worker who earns $50,000 should pay higher tax rates than somebody pulling in $50 million. Now, on the surface, I would agree with basically all of that. It is, in fact, most of what he said is true. The problem comes in is there are a lot of generalities thrown in there. And this speech that he gave is a result of a commentary that Warren Buffett wrote. Actually, it was an opinion piece that he put in the New York Times talking about how he paid a lower tax rate than other people in his office. What we want to talk about today is some of the facts surrounding these issues. So the Obama plan is that no household making over $1 million annually should pay a smaller share of income than middle-class families. However, on average, it's our contention that these people already do pay a much lower rate. People making over $1 million do pay a lower rate. We're going to talk a little bit about some of this data comes from the IRS, some from the Office of Management and Budget, and we have some good information to make the case for what the facts are and not just throw around generalities. So, try to keep the partisan politics out of that. Let's look at the one side. The Republicans frequently note that about 50% of Americans pay no income tax. And Democrats complain that billionaires are paying lower tax than their secretaries. And so how do we resolve these? Well, first of all, let's start off with a few facts. They're very confusing because their points are different. Democrats speak of tax rates as averages and generally include payroll taxes. Republicans tend to focus on federal taxes and the marginal rate. And so let's talk about that for a minute. The average tax rate is if you put all your income minus all your deductions and you divide the amount of tax you paid by your income. They also tack on Social Security and Medicare. That's an average tax rate. A marginal tax rate is if you make $50,000, what is the next dollar taxed at? So if you make $50,001, how much was that next $1 taxed at? So right away, you have this disparity between effective tax rate, marginal tax rate, and do you include Social Security and Medicare tax, which is another 7.65% for the employee, 7.65% for the employer. So right away, this argument, you've got to make sure that everyone is talking about the same thing. The other topic that comes up along this was with income disparity, and there is vast income disparity in the U.S. With a progressive tax system, you are going to end up with the relatively few people at the top paying the majority of taxes. So the most recent information from the IRS from 2008 shows that the 400 wealthiest Americans paid $19.5 billion in income tax. That's a lot of money from 400 people, almost $20 billion in tax. Now, their average, or what we call effective tax rate, was 18.11%. That's down from almost 30% in 1995. And so that's one of the arguments that people make, that the wealthiest, their share of tax has gone down. Well, their effective rate has gone down, but if you look at the actual data, and this is all from the IRS website. If you've got nothing else to do and want to look at this, you can pull up the tax return data for the 400 top individuals in the country. And when you look at the dollars paid by these people, even though their effective rate has gone down, the dollars paid has gone up. And that's simply, in my opinion, not so much from the tax cuts, but their income has gone up so much in that time frame since 1995. So, as I always say, both in investing or this, averages don't tell the whole story. You need to look at things like average, median, standard deviation, things like that. Well, today we're going to kind of keep the math simple for you. So of the 400 taxpayers, 238 taxpayers paid a marginal rate of 35%, the top income tax bracket. And so what that means is that for more than half of the taxpayers, every extra dollar that they made, a third went to federal tax. And in terms of the effective tax rate, though, the average, I'm using average and effective sort of interchangeably today, only 59 taxpayers had an effective tax rate between 30 and 35%. So what that means is that the Republicans arguing are correct and the Democrats arguing are correct. They're just arguing different tax rates, marginal versus effective. Well, we're coming up on our second break. When we come back, we'll continue to give you some facts concerning tax rates and the Buffett Rule. So for All Things Money, I'm your host, David Blain, and we will be back after a few short messages.